Okay, I'm back, and now we want to talk about ring systems. And I wanted you to know that Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they all have ring systems. It's just that the ring systems of Saturn are so much more visible. So we're going to concentrate on the ring systems of Saturn, and then basically what we're talking about is very similar to the other ring systems in our solar system. So what are the rings composed of? So they're composed of approximately 1 billion particles of water ice, about the size of a snowball. Now there are some pieces in the ring system that are bigger than the softball, or there's also some that are smaller. But on average, the size of the particles that makes up the rings are individual little chunks of ice about this big. So it's really amazing that when you take your telescope and you look at the ring system of Saturn, that what you're really looking at is just teeny tiny little chunks of ice, billions of them. Now, every one of those billion little snowballs has its own orbit. And the orbit is going to be based on Kepler's laws. So depending on how far away that little snowball is from Saturn, that's going to determine its period. How long is it going to take to go around Saturn? So that you've got billions and billions of these little particles in orbit around Saturn, but when you look at it from Earth, it kind of looks like rings. It is not like a CD. So in a CD, you've got this disc, and then you can take the disc and you can rotate it. So the rings of Saturn are not rotating at the same speed, like a phonograph disc when you turn it around and around. So in this case, each of those individual little particles have their own orbits depending on their distance from Saturn. Another interesting thing is that there are actually moons inside of some of those rings. And what those moons do is they act as gap moons and shepherd moons. So the gravity of those moons helps to keep the rings in a stable orbit around Saturn. So what is the origin of the rings? We think that the rings of Saturn are a temporary feature. And so if nothing were to happen to those rings, they would disappear in about 1 million years. That they would eventually decay in their orbits and would spiral into Saturn. So there needs to be some mechanism that is keeping new snowballs in the ring system. And what we think is happening is that occasionally an asteroid comes in and it hits one of the moons of Saturn, and then that sprays ice and material into orbit, and then that ice settles down into the ring system. So that's where those rings come from. All right, in our next segment, we're going to start talking about asteroids and comets.